I'm going to start by asking you, Derek, just to give the kind of audience a bit of the backstory of kind of your story in the sector, the success that you've had with your own business, and then what you've been doing since then, and then what you do today.
Thank you. I always enjoy these conversations because I always take something back from this and think about.
You're going to be disappointed by what you're going to get out of it.
Trained you. Yeah, originally, you can tell from my accent, from Canada, I moved to Europe to work for a Dutch company and a German company for a while, always in and they sent me around the world. It became DSM. It was originally in Crystal Palace. They sent me to Mexico to run a plant, Egypt to run a plant, and operations, back to Italy, and things like that, Sweden. But they sent me to Montreal to manage a biologics plant. It didn't go very well, so I left the company and moved to Tampa to run GMP locations, Form Dev, a high throughput QC testing laboratory back in Montreal, and a biosafety group in Seattle. 1 year later, the company came and said they're going to sell all the units, and I'd be out of job, of course. And I went back to my wife and said, well, I'm sorry, bad news, but we decided to do a buyout and bought that company. And then through a lot of work with people like Raman, we were able to grow the business and sell it to Capsugel in 2016, and that became Lonza, obviously the next year, as you know. Then I added more into the investor side and invested in a number of CDMOs. Currently, as of this week, also I'm on 11 active boards and groups. That sounds like a lot. First question again is, how's that work? But everything comes and goes. Things are up and then down, and at this stage, it's more about seeing the forest and the trees and saying, oh, have you realized this? Being a bit diversified, and they are all complementary. They trade leads or trade ideas. Certainly when there's a crisis, the COVID crisis, it was very easy to take best practice from one and bring it to another. Just this last month, you might have heard we had a port strike in the States. I heard about that from one company and went to the others and said, what are you doing about this? They hadn't heard about it, and they made plans for that. So that's very synergistic. And with that.
11 board roles, that is.
Yeah.
I mean,
I wrote them down just to give you a quiz.
I've got 2 and that's enough for me on a given month, but 11 is. So the kind of main focus of this discussion is around maximising the multiple and how brand positioning drives value. And you mentioned obviously the business that you built and ended up selling to Capsugel, that became Lonza. In that first kind of founder exit that you had, like, were you conscious of thinking about brand positioning and positioning in the market? Was that something that was an important factor back then, or is it something that may have developed since then on the other businesses that you bought and sold?
It certainly continues to develop, and things back in 2016 are not the same as now post-COVID. But I think the main thing about branding, I've learned from people like yourself, is that you have to stay authentic and it has to be consistent. So the authenticity of a brand and marketing has to be consistent with over time. And it has to be true. And you have different stakeholders. You have your employees, you have your customers, and you have your future exit, who you're going to sell to. And if you're not considering also branding when you're looking to exit, you won't get the high multiple. So you're thinking that there are a lot of lifestyle businesses out there, businesses that will make a good income for their founder, but will never be exitable, never be actionable, as they say here. You can't find a place to put it, because it hasn't got the spice or the ability to appeal to the next buyer. It doesn't have the ability to have them, you do something with it and grow it. You have to think that when you're going to exit, you have to make the other company that you're selling to truly believe and understand that they're going to be able to do at least 3 times better than what you do. They have to have a 3x multiple, 3x return. And hopefully more, but that's a minimum. And if your market is so small and you've got 50% of them, then it's a different play. It might be that with this and something they've already got, they can grow better. So there's many roads to Rome.
Yeah.
It's consistent, but it has to be also consistent with the customers.
Yeah.
Because if that's your brand, then you're not building a business.
And you mentioned something there on kind of authenticity, and I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and someone asked me, it's like, what's like the best marketing trick whatever, wasn't the word. And I was like, you know, the best marketing trick is being really good at what you do. I was like, just being very good at what you do, and your reputation will grow. And it doesn't matter what your marketing looks like, people will talk about you in a kind of positive light. So many of us in this room will probably work for businesses that are private equity backed these days, or investor backed. Like ourselves at Raman, we have a private equity backer in North Edge Capital, and it does change the dynamic of how you. It doesn't actually change the external perception or anything, but it changes the dynamic of the cadence in which the business is run. How have you? I mean, I suppose in terms of the kind of experiences you have had in terms of a founder business becoming private equity backed or investor backed, how do you not lose some of the thing that made it special in the first place? Because a lot of companies at that scale, the customer sentiment is very strong, right? Because it's been founder-led and it's done really, really well, and there's a real sense of togetherness, gets sold, and then something changes in the cadence. Do you come across that in your experience, and how do you get over it?
Yeah, I think it's important that you're indispensable, but as a company, but not as a founder. Mm-hmm. That's critical, because if you're indispensable, you have to be indispensable as a company, that the customer cannot displace you or replace you. But if you're indispensable as a founder, it will change, right? And then the customer will see the different color, and that's one example.
Great example. I'm very dispensable if you ask any of mine. They're all like, absolutely, yes. And again, for people in private equity backed companies, one thing we spend a lot of time talking to clients around is like how a brand can help translate into like a tangible factor when it comes to kind of investor value. So how do you do that, right? Like what kind of brand things, you know, for example, where it's like owning a niche, having a clear value prop, for example, what kind of things should we all be thinking about in terms of utilizing our brand to help build value in the organization?
I mean, let's just take it from the investor exit point of view. So I'm not trying to say this is what you should do for your customers, just to keep the conversation simple. I think if you're looking for an exit, you have to be appealing to somebody that's not already in the market. I've got 4 examples, because I'm thinking this one through, what's happening now. So that means that if you go to a process and go to market your company, there are going to be a whole bunch of private equities, and when you look at the final bids, they're all very similar. There's not much space between them, but there'll be one outlier. I had an outlier, that was Capsugel. PCI, and that was another one, but it was in the range. So you have that one outlier. And why was that an outlier? Well, because I was the originator of the service side of the Acceleradose, which was a Capsugel piece of equipment. So they had equipment, and we were the service provider, so they had to have us. Currently, what must be happening is with BioVectra being bought by Agilent, complete outsider. Like, where do they come from? And they must see something with the unique assets of BioVectra that they go for. So what do? You maybe take some risk, because it's risky to be the first one. You got to be a leader, not a follower, and take that risk, and sometimes bet the company on that risk. I bet the company on the risk. We didn't use the Acceleradose for a year and a half. I was really worried, but it worked out. BioVectra is a strange combination of small molecule APIs and microbial fermentation in the far North Atlantic of Canada. So very risky, but unique. And so we found a unique player in that way. I think that maybe another example, although it's Saran having the investment by Bain Capital. Bain is not a private equity group; it's a life science group that bought it, bought it or invested $200 million. Why did Saran win against the 2 or 3 other players in the bid? Don't know, but that is a unique entrant into the business. Bain is unique. It was not on anybody's radar. And neither was Agilent, and certainly neither was Capsugel at the time. They just had started. So it's got to be out there. Purple cow.
But like, I remember someone saying this, like, in kind of beauty is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to an acquirer. They may see something in your organization that no one else sees. And so in those examples where it's like a strategic buy, a trade buyer, they see the kind of 1 + 1 = 10 as opposed to just the investment criteria, which is I buy you and I can 3x this company, which is very different. And so for all of us here today that work in sales and marketing or commercial functions, and how do we in our day jobs then think about helping support the value drivers of a business and support the kind of value creation in a business?
That's a really good one, and I think there's the key. I think was it Roger or Stephen mentioned that you guys are the eyes and ears. I can't remember which one of your panelists mentioned that, but you see the possibilities and you bring them to management. Somebody who's in operations or the board for sure cannot see these things. And I'll give two current examples. One is Microsize, which is a micronization company we bought back from Lonza. So we sold it in 2016 and bought it back in 2021, which is a good strategy. Sell high, buy low.
That's what we should have done.
Really obvious. But it's micronization, right? It's not spray drying, it's micronization. And how we add innovation to it is that somebody came to us and said, well, we need to find a way to do a solubility test on very small amounts of API. There's a Finnish company called the Solubility Company. Microsize invested in the Solubility Company and brought the lab over to the States. So now we have something to talk about. And I know when I was in sales, I always wanted a reason to be able to talk to the customer. You can't just go there and say, hey, again, I'm a bioreactor. You wanted something to justify the appointment. That's one example. Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing is another company, and they made partnerships with SHL and LTS, which are cartridge and syringe producers, and West. So 3 partnerships that are bringing leads to us, but also providing innovation.
So I'm just on that point, so it's quite an interesting one. So you're seeing the companies you invest in building strategic partnerships effectively with complementary adjacent companies that are now driving
Leads.
But it also drives their reputation potentially as well. So if you're working with West, for example, like that's a very, back to like kind of building your reputation and being seen as a strategic partner, it's very powerful when it comes to running the process.
I think you call it the halo effect, right? You get the halo effect of a long-standing company like West, for example.
Yeah, and certainly I remember when we took remarketing to market, and Emma probably remembers this, and we had a handful of really blue chip clients. Probably can't, I shouldn't mention it, don't mention it. Hi Tom. But it made such a difference because it immediately got people to take this relatively small business a bit more serious. Like, wow, these guys are actually working with some serious players. And so it's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking it wasn't just our brand positioning, it was the brand position of our clients. Almost as good as our clients were, as successful as our clients were, actually made for a greater kind of range of investors that were interested in the business.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, with your investor arm, so when you're looking at investing in a business or joining the board, how do you My guess is you would Google the company and have a look at them and just think about is that a fair thing? That would be some of the first touch points you would go to, and what does that play a role in? My guess is it plays a role in your initial assessment of a business by how it looks, how it feels, how it comes across, the leadership team, all the stuff we do with clients to help kind of build a profile for that organization.
Yeah, it has a lot of similarity to a regular sales process, selling in general, except we don't have a CRM to use.
This is
nice. LinkedIn is the best for us, but it is about quickly learning about the company, and very much like this industry, checking background checks. Say, what is, does anybody use that company? What is the reputation of the people? And that is the very second question. I think that we obviously want to have a good chemistry with the management, and then we can add some added value to it. But it's at this stage, we definitely want to find companies that are not in process, because then we get a lead on something that's in process. Usually to be somebody better or somebody more expensive. So if you have your own company, I hate myself for saying this, but go in process. You pay money, but at least then you'll probably get the right field. But we're looking for typical companies that are not in process, so we can have a closer connection to the management. I think those are the main things. And
sure. I mean, I wrote down reputation. It's such an interesting word, isn't it? Like how important a company's reputation is when it comes to investment, but not just the brand reputation, but the reputation of the senior management team and what they like. And I assume that's a big. So I will say to customers like, maybe put your senior management team on the website and show them. Don't have a horrific picture from the 70s. Like have a nice picture so we can give a sense of who they are. But it just shows you how important when it's more than obviously just the picture, but how important the management team and the leadership team are when it comes to making acquisition.
Yeah, definitely make sure that you're out there, that people know who the CEO is, do those podcasts there, get them out there. That's critical. At this point, it's also important that the private equity is working on their brand as well.
Which most of them don't.
No, they all look the same.
That's a whole other business we should start.
Yeah, they all look the same.
Yeah.
And the good ones out there are trying to differentiate themselves by doing things like speed to close, which is, a typical private equity doesn't want to spend any money until they own it, right? They got exclusivity, and then they start spending the money on lawyers. But one company I'm working with is unusual in that they are trying to differentiate themselves by being able to close and look like they're really serious by spending all the money up front. And it's risky, right? Because they're probably going to lose more than they win. But it's interesting that they will differentiate themselves because most bids are not going to the highest price. It's going to the one that's near the top, but has the best reputation that they're going to close. And it's like those potlatches in the Northwest where you really prove that you're serious by burning money or burning things. That's
it is the reputation thing is so interesting, and I'll tell you a little secret that when we took the business to market around that time, we'd never entered like fast-growing agency lists or anything like that, and I thought, you know what, I know the type of people that are going to go looking. So we entered them all, and we were, at the time, we were the fastest-growing agency, PR agency actually in the UK. And if you Googled remarketing, that was the first thing that came up, and we knew as we went through the process, that's exactly what people do. They go looking for it, and they say. So it comes back to your digital presence is so important. So if you think about this, if you've got like terrible Glassdoor reviews, right? If you've got terrible reputation, if you've got bad press, that stuff lives forever online. And so having a positive reputation, I think, is really important. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think that happened a few times. Is that it just takes one black mark to kill a deal, because nobody wants to find out afterwards that was the reason that something failed. And Glassdoor is an example. It's like, oh my gosh, they have a employee problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I wanted to talk about the investment cycle in terms of, so what we see is when a private equity company buys a business, there's normally a flurry of activity when it comes to brand, positioning, strategy at the front end. So particularly when it's often found at a first capital kind of institution, because the conversation you and I had there, I know it's not but they've never given sales and marketing a massive thought. They've often grown through just being good at what they do. So we're looking to talk about that piece, like how important kind of putting solid foundations in place around that point is. But also I'd love you to go and talk about when you go towards exit, like if you're a year before exit, how important is kind of communications. And we can come back to microsites actually, because I think they're not at an exit point, but it'd be great to talk about them in terms of how you position them or think about positioning them in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think that any company with less than 10 million EBITDA or so, or 20 million EBITDA, has a poor CRM. And that's something that you guys can work on. It's the CRMs are the value in the future, right? It's the pipeline. And it's remarkable that everybody buys one but doesn't use it and have them in place. And it's great to show the future. And I'll give one example, not microsite, but an example where it looks like it's a 100% win rate. Well, that can't be. It's because they're not putting the opportunities in. Or, and we want to know that. We want to know what the universe is out there. So that's one thing you can position a bit better on for that. I think it's preparing a company for exit is also to see what is the smallest visible market, smallest viable market, right? Something that is clear, pure play, easy to understand, but it's viable. So you don't want to be everything to everybody, but define that clearly in your elevator speech. What is the smallest viable market, and then show that you can grow from that point. You don't want too small, you don't want too big. That's positioning too.
And what about on the exit side of things? So if you've got that niche position, and if you have got, say, a particular capability that's kind of really hot and sexy in the market, you're coming to market, my view would be like, make sure the entire audience out there own that term. And would you agree that that's the way to do it?
Definitely. Number one is like Hertz or what is it? Being number one in the market, and that's really hard. We're a very fragmented industry, so fragmented. But if you can, again, get that elevator speech said, yes, we have bioreactors, but we're the only one that have them in the Northeast or something. We're the only ones in California, or something that's very specific that appeals. You'll find the right buyer. We're the largest microbial fermenter in the world, or something.
Yeah.
Bioreactor. And then you own it. It's all about how you define the market, right? You will be number one in something.
Yeah, let's just work out what that is.
Yeah.
Be a category worth owning. Create your own category. I'm going to take a quick pause then and look across the room and see if anyone else has a question for Derek. I've got a few more questions, but it'd be good to see if any of the audience. Dan, you must have a question.
I've got plenty of questions.
I looked straight at the journalist and everyone.
This is all off the record.
I'm not sure it's a question yet, but I do want to use the old adage, you can't polish a turd, but you can put glitter on it. And if you go out to
Directly Dan.
Again, this isn't my field, but I see a lot of brand strategies that just look like glittered turds. Again, I don't really know where this question's going, but why do so many people get it so wrong? And is it just what Raman was saying about, what's the marketing trick? It's just doing it right.
Yeah, it's more than that, but I think it's doing it right and doing the right thing. So you can do everything right, but are you really thinking of what you should be doing, right? Let's say, back to microside, we only focused on micronization, and we're really good at it, we are. But if microsites only did that, then we're not positioning ourselves as extra value to the customers, and we're not positioning ourselves for any future exit. So we added solubility to that capability. We got in close with Austin PX on their kinetazole technology, so that we are getting those type of leads and shine to the business. So maybe that's where your question was. It can't just be do everything right, because what's actionable about that? What do you guys leave and say, I'm going to work harder?
But very few companies do very much right. That's the problem. So it's kind of balancing. Well, no, I mean it's balancing the brand strategy, what we actually can grasp on, with what the company actually does.
I've never understood why, and I've been doing this since more CPHIs than you. I went to the 1990s.
I didn't the 90s. I was a noughties child. CPHI terms, obviously.
But in all that time, I've never understood why our net promoter score for every company I see is in the lowest quintile. There's no customers are really happy in general. There's more detractors than promoters. And you compare that to the auto industry or even software, we're really poor.
Is that not a massive, is that not a huge turn-off from an investment perspective, that you look at an opportunity and as fancy as they look from the outside or their reputation is, if their NPS is
poor.
That must, for me anyway, I think customer sentiment and how your customers view is the most important thing. So would it not just massively put you off in that type of situation? Or do you take it with a pinch of salt because it's kind of the norm?
Yeah, I think that if you get a new private equity, like if you syndicate something and you get a new guy come in and they look at that, they get upset and they leave. But anybody who's in the industry, regular players, they know that the NPS is really low, and they go and they talk to the customers. They always talk to customers too. Yeah. That's tough for salespeople and us. We marketing for potential outsider to go talk to customers because we don't want the customers to know that we're for sale, right? So.
I'm laughing because we had that exact situation where we were about 2 or 3 months away from completing with North Edge, and they were like, we need to speak to 15 of your customers. Yeah. I think I actually told them to F off. Actually, I was like, no, you're not speaking to any of our customers because you're going to spook our customers. But actually, what they did, which was really smart, is they kind of dressed it up as market research. And so they basically did it as like they were ringing the customer like, how are marketing doing, like what are they good at, what are they not good at, and we actually, performed phenomenally well in that situation. I can't remember, it was like 60 something. Our NPS score was, I mean, we got a bit lucky with those clients at the time where everyone seemed to be happy and at the same time, and it actually really was a value add. It was actually probably the validation point where our private equity company were like, wow, these guys are actually, what they're telling us is actually true. Whereas you must have situations where they're saying, we're amazing, we're the best company ever, and you speak to their customer like, that's a nightmare.
Yeah. Usually we suss that out beforehand. So I think that people, operating partners, know and they do the checks themselves before it ever gets to that stage. And if that is a problem, then we stop.
You stop before you invest that time.
Yeah, and then at the end, we still check with the customers because the larger the check size, the greater the risk, and the more heads are going to roll if they get this wrong. And there can't be somebody saying, did you check with the customers? No, but we had Derek talk to the CEO. Who's Derek? So they big checks that will do that. And I think in the negotiation, you can say, well, you can talk to 2 companies or 3 companies.
Yeah.
Not the 15, maybe, something like that.
And so, speaking about kind of reputation and customer sentiment, and one of the things we've seen an interest in kind of developing in the last few years is like being seen as an acquirer of choice. So if you are the company that is actually going out buying companies, almost like a platform company, how important is that for your portfolio companies where you want to build and add more capabilities by acquiring other businesses, but they might not know who you are or what you guys do? That must be a bit of a challenge.
It is. It's critical. It's really critical, and that's why the good private equities are concentrated in this area. They've done other deals in this area, and they've got that reputation. Give an example where the private equity might disagree with the management on a direction, but if the management decides to do it, then the private equity will say yes. Even if the private equity was right in the end, you got to back the management. And if you don't, then that word gets around, and it makes it more difficult to do the next deal. So that's one other. So it's part of the brand of the private equity.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one final question for Derek before I do. Does anyone else want to ask Derek a question? I can't believe no one else has got a question. They're all very shy. Dan, not you. Anyone but Dan. All right, final question around, you've got a lot of people in the audience that are CEOs, senior managers, heads of commercial, head of marketing, sales. Any kind of final tips or advice? And I'm conscious you've got loads of notes, which is great. You came so prepared. Anything that you didn't want to communicate that you think it might be useful for these guys to go away and think about and actually take into their own roles?
Re-emphasizing what I've said is bring the innovations to the board. Bring the innovations to. You guys are in the position where you report. You are making. You're meeting with the board. Tell them all the things you're seeing. Provide that added value, not only for your own career, but I think for the benefit of the company. That you can bring the innovations in, and then ask them why that innovation might not be a good choice from the company. The company will say, well, it's too risky, or we're not, and you'll get more understanding of what could fit. Okay. It gets you the best choice, whatever you said.
Yeah, well, you heard it here first, innovations to your board. So, yeah. Everyone, if you can show your appreciation.